At Thanksgiving dinner, my father set his knife down the silver catching the light and said, "Your sister was born to live soft, and you make money for her. If you have a problem, there's the door." No shouting, just that steady tone that kills faster than rage. My mother's hand froze midair. Harper kept chewing, and the world went very still. I didn't argue. I gathered my plate, folded the napkin, and smiled like I finally understood the joke. "Then I guess you'll handle the bills." They laughed short uneasy. I laughed too, because what they didn't know was that the meal they just finished had already cost them everything. When people ask what broke me that night, they expect a single moment, one sharp crack that split everything open. But the truth is, cracks had been spreading for years, quiet and steady under the surface of the Moreno house. The dinner was just when the light finally hit them. I grew up behind the counter of Moreno Art and Supply, the store my parents ran in the heart of Santa Fe. To most, it looked charming. Handmade brushes in glass jars, shelves lined with watercolor tubes, the faint smell of turpentine and paper. But behind that bell that chimed sweetly every time someone walked in, there was a quiet divide. My father, Richard, ran it like an empire. My mother, Elena, moved between the aisles, pretending to balance everything. And my sister, Harper, the so-called artist, floated through it all like sunlight, untouched, adored, and completely unburdened. I wasn't sunlight. I was structure. "You're the practical one," Dad always said, the same way people describe cement. It holds things up but never gets noticed. I stayed late to balance receipts, filed supplier orders, cleaned pallets hardened with acrylic, and built display walls for weekend sales. Harper painted on the same tables I wiped clean, and every smudge she left behind was called creative residue. When I was 11, I won a youth design competition sponsored by the state's architecture board. I came home beaming, holding the certificate. Dad skimmed it, nodded once, and said, "Good. Now help your sister organize her paints." A month later, Harper finger-painted a sunset in class. Mom framed it, made copies, and sold them at the store counter for $10 each. Customers cooed over her natural gift. Mine was efficiency. Hers was grace. By the time I hit high school, I was already managing the cash register on weekends, designing flyers, and handling supplier invoices. Harper skipped shifts to sketch downtown. When she wanted to host a pop-up art night, I set up the tables, arranged lighting, and managed the guests. When it failed, Dad told her failure was part of being an artist. When I made the store profitable that summer, he called it luck. I went to SCAD on partial scholarship, graduated with honors, and became a curator, not the kind that dusts paintings, but the kind that decides what's worth showing. I organized exhibitions across Santa Fe's art district. My name started appearing in press write-ups. My parents bragged to anyone who'd listen. "That's our daughter, the one who works with real artists," but the pride stopped. The second I began setting boundaries. Independence wasn't something they respected. It was something they resented. Still, when the mortgage fell behind, I sent money. When Harper's projects failed, I paid suppliers quietly to keep the store's reputation intact. Every transfer felt like insurance against guilt. "Just temporary," Mom always said. Family helps family. I believed it until I realized I wasn't helping family. I was funding favoritism. The irony, they thought that Thanksgiving table was about gratitude. They didn't know it was my last act of it. The week before Thanksgiving, I barely slept. Between finalizing the winter exhibition and reviewing loaned works from 2 private collectors, I was running on caffeine and adrenaline. Still, I drove to my parents' house the night before the holiday, just like always. Some habits die slower than love. The house looked the same as it had for 20 years, the cracked adobe walls, the crooked Moreno Art and Supply sign hanging off one chain, the scent of oil paint that never really left. But inside, everything felt smaller. Or maybe I had just outgrown it. Harper was already there, lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She was wearing a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than my rent. "Mom and Dad surprised me," she said, tilting her wrist to show off a gold bracelet. "It's for my art reel milestone." A milestone. The reel had 500 likes. I set my bag down and smiled thinly. "Congratulations," I said, the word dry in my mouth. Dad walked in, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Kate, did you bring the cranberry chutney?" he asked, not looking up. "Yeah, it's in the fridge." "Good," he said. Make sure it's plated right before dinner. You know presentation isn't your mom's strong suit. I almost laughed. I'd curated full museum exhibits with precision lighting and temperature control, but somehow my father still thought my biggest contribution was knowing where to place side dishes. Dinner started warm, the usual chorus of pleasantries and wine. Mom fussed over the table settings. Harper talked about her brand partnerships. I stayed quiet, cutting my turkey into small, perfect pieces. Then Dad cleared his throat, that familiar signal that he was about to make something sting. "Your sister's been doing so well lately," he said, smiling at Harper. "We're proud of her. She was born to live soft, you know. Always had that touch." The knife slipped slightly in my hand. "Soft," I repeated. He nodded, oblivious, or maybe deliberate. "Yeah, some people are made for beauty, others for the grind. You've always been good at keeping things running." My mother reached for her glass. "Your father just means you're dependable," she added quickly, eyes avoiding mine. Then Dad leaned back, napkin tossed on the table, and said the line that would echo for months. "If you have a problem with that, Kate, there's the door." No one moved. Harper smirked into her wine. Mom looked at the centerpiece like it could save her. That was the moment it stopped hurting. The moment everything went still. I realized this wasn't my family's first betrayal. It was just the first one I refused to clean up after. That night, I drove home without turning on the radio. The silence felt cleaner than any song could. The headlights stretched down the highway, cutting through the desert like two steady lines of truth, cold, bright, irreversible. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. It was something sharper than anger, something cold and oddly steady. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was observing, curating like always. Except this time, the exhibit was my own family, and I was done pretending their chaos was art. Mason was still awake when I walked into the apartment. My boyfriend had a camera in his lap, sorting through prints from his last shoot. He looked up immediately. How bad I hung my coat toed off my shoes. "Bad enough to end it," I said. "All of it." He waited. He always did. I told him everything, the toast, the silence. The way Harper smiled like she'd finally won a game I never agreed to play. I expected my voice to shake somewhere in the retelling, but it didn't. It came out calm, almost detached, like I was describing someone else's life. "So what now?" Mason asked. I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial folders. The screen's glow reflected in the window, casting both of us in pale blue. "Now," I said, "I stopped funding my own humiliation." I had been transferring money every month for nearly 4 years. Mortgage payments, supplier bills, the occasional temporary loan. All logged neatly in folders labeled Family Support Business Help Harper Supplies. I started deleting auto-pay authorizations one by one. Mortgage account remove access. Supplier line revoke approval. It felt like snipping invisible wires that had held me hostage. Mason didn't interrupt. He just handed me a mug of tea the way you hand someone a towel after they've stepped out of the wreckage. By midnight, I drafted a short email to my father-mother and the store's business account. Effective immediately, I'm ending all financial contributions and access to shared accounts. Please remove my name from store operations. Kate. I didn't add threats or explanations, just that. Precision is its own language. The next morning, I woke up early, not from anxiety, but from clarity. I showered, dressed, and drove to the gallery. My assistant Clara looked surprised to see me. "You're working today?" "Yeah," I said, flipping through the exhibition plan. "I'm renaming the winter show." She blinked. "To what boundaries?" The title hit me like oxygen. Every piece suddenly made sense. The sculptures about containment, the paintings about negative space, the installations that used glass walls instead of open rooms. It wasn't just art anymore. It was message. 3 days later, the phone started ringing. First Mom, then Dad, then Harper. I didn't answer. I just watched the missed calls pile up like brushstrokes, desperate, uneven, loud. Voicemails poured in. Kate, the mortgage payment bounced. "Call us, your mother's not sleeping." "Hey sis, maybe you can front me a little until my collab clears." Each one went straight to archive. That weekend, I walked through the nearly finished exhibit alone. The lights were dim, the gallery quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system. I stopped in front of a piece I'd almost cut, a cracked mirror suspended from the ceiling, the shards catching and distorting the reflection of whoever stood beneath it. I stared at my fractured reflection and thought, finally, it looks honest. Outside, snow began to fall soft, slow, unbothered. For once, so was I. The first voicemail came at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. My father's voice was tight-clipped. Kate, the supplier account's locked. I need you to fix it. No greeting, no apology, just command. By noon, my mother called. Her tone was the opposite sweet, desperate tremoring. Your father's stressed. We're behind on the mortgage again. Could you just cover this month? Just this one. Then Harper's message arrived, sing-song and self-assured. Hey sis, we're planning a new art night at the store. I need you to send $10,000 to secure the space. I'll put your name on the promo promise. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't have to. The silence would speak. By the third day, the emails came. Payment overdue, supplier suspension notice. Past due warning. Every digital echo of the very system I'd maintained for years now turned against them. For once, the business they'd treated like a family heirloom was showing what it really was, an unpaid bill dressed as legacy. I drove past the store that Friday afternoon, not to gloat, but to see the place objectively. The window displays I once designed were faded now. Harper's prints were still taped up, sun-bleached, curling at the edges. A handwritten sign read, "Closed early family emergency." Inside, I saw my father, pacing phone pressed to his ear. My mother stood behind the counter, clutching her back. Harper sat on a stool, scrolling, pretending it wasn't happening. The sight should have hurt. Instead, it settled me. For the first time, I wasn't part of their performance. That evening, Aunt Lillian called. She never called unless it mattered. Your parents are in trouble, she said. IRS sent a notice about deductions from Harper's gallery year. They claimed business expenses that don't exist. I let the words hang. And they listed you as a secondary guarantor, she said quietly. But the audit only goes back 3 years. You can clear your name easily, Kate, but they can't. That night, I drafted one final message to my parents and Harper. I've been notified about the tax discrepancies tied to the store. I'm not involved, and I'll be submitting the required separation documents this week. Please refrain from listing my name on any future filings or accounts. No emotion, no threat, just truth, cold, final, and irreversible. By Saturday, my father showed up at my apartment. I heard the knock before I saw him on the security camera, same leather jacket, same authority that used to make me freeze. He didn't look angry this time. He looked small. Open the door, Katie. I didn't. He spoke through the crackling speaker. You think you can just walk away? This family falls apart without you. I pressed the intercom. Then maybe it should. He banged once hard. You owe us after everything we've done. I laughed before I could stop myself. You're right, I said softly. And I've finally paid in full. Then I ended the call. By Sunday, the store's credit was frozen. Harper posted a vague Instagram story about toxic energy and family betrayal, which ironically went viral enough for the local paper to pick up the story. That Monday, I arrived at the gallery early to meet with the press about boundaries. The irony didn't escape me. The same people who once told me to stay behind the scenes were now watching my name headline the city's art page. The exhibition opening was full curators, collectors, artists I admired for years. I walked through the crowd, greeting guests, adjusting lights. The mirror installation glimmered under the track lamps, its shards catching the room in hundreds of fractured reflections. Halfway through the night, Mason touched my arm. They're here, he murmured. I turned. My parents stood near the doorway. Richard in his old blazer, Elena clutching her purse like a lifeline. Harper trailed behind them, face pale under her makeup. They looked like tourists who'd wandered into the wrong museum. Dad started toward me. We need to talk. I smiled, politely professional. This isn't the place. Then make it the place, he snapped. We're drowning Kate. The bank. The bank, I interrupted, doesn't take guilt as currency. Mom stepped forward, voice cracking. We just need your help until things settle. I shook my head. You mean until I settle your debts again? Harper spoke then, her tone sharp but brittle. You're acting like you're better than us. I met her eyes. No, I'm acting like I finally believe I'm enough. The guests had gone silent around us, though none pretended not to listen. For a moment, it felt like a play spotlight's audience climax. I'd spent my life curating other people's art, but this was mine. I gestured toward the installation behind me. You see that mirror? Every shard reflects a piece of what's left when something breaks. You can glue it back together, but it never fits the same. Dad looked lost. What does that mean? It means you can fix your store or not, I said quietly. But I'm not one of the pieces you get to reattach. Mason stepped closer, his presence grounding me. My voice didn't shake when I added, "If you have a problem, there's still the door." The words landed exactly how his once had, but this time the power shifted. He blinked, stunned. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, my mother following. Harper lingered a beat longer, eyes darting between me and the mirror before she left too. The crowd stayed silent until the door closed, then applause quiet at first, then louder. I didn't plan it, I didn't need it, but it happened and it felt like a closing act. Later that night, when the gallery emptied, I stood alone in the glow of the last spotlight. Mason came up beside me. "You okay?" "I think so," I said. "It's strange. The silence doesn't hurt anymore." He smiled faintly. "That's because it's finally yours." I looked around at the reflections, still catching light. For the first time, I didn't see fragments, I saw a whole. Outside, snow dusted the street again. Somewhere across town, my father was probably closing up the store for the last time. My mother would be counting leftover inventory. Harper might be staring into her phone, wondering how the comments turned on her. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. My world had shifted clean and deliberate. I had curated my freedom. And for the first time, the exhibit was me. They sold the store within 3 months. A regional franchise bought out the inventory for barely half its value. After legal fees and back taxes, my parents walked away with less than $5,000. The house followed soon after, replaced by a 1-bedroom rental near the rail yard. My father took a night shift loading trucks for a shipping company. My mother painted small watercolors of adobe doors and sold them at weekend markets. Harper found work at a frame shop on Cerrillos Road, measuring glass and cutting mats, finally learning precision the hard way. Meanwhile, I moved into a sunlit condo downtown 3 blocks from the plaza. My new exhibition proposal was accepted by a museum in Tao's theme After Silence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mason helped me hang the first mock-up hands, steady eyes proud. When the opening invitation went live, I stared at the headline curated by Kate Moreno. No mention of family, no disclaimers, just me. I thought of that Thanksgiving table, of the way my father said, "If you have a problem, there's the door." He was right in a way. Walking through that door didn't ruin me, it saved me. The night. After Silence opened, I stood beneath the last piece of framed napkin pressed behind glass, the same one I'd folded that Thanksgiving night. People thought it was symbolism. It was and it wasn't. It was proof. When the lights dimmed and the gallery emptied, Mason handed me a glass of wine. "Worth it?" he asked. I smiled. Every second. I sent one final letter weeks later, short-typed, unsigned. "Love isn't one-way labor. I wish you growth, but from a distance. No return address, no bitterness, just peace. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who taught you how to stay silent, tell me your story. Where are you watching from? I promise you're not the only one who had to find freedom at the door."